Alrighty, welcome to the 142nd edition of the MMA Circus here on BloodyElbow.com and live on YouTube. My name is Nick Baldwin, and joining me for the very first time, this is very long overdue, it is Marvyn Timog, Big Marv himself from TSN 1290 Radio. He is the host of The Weigh-In here in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Big Marv, what's going on? How are you?
I'm good, buddy. How you doing? Thanks for having me on.
Yes, as I said, it's we've known each other for a couple of years now. I think the first time I went on the weigh-in was July 2015, so it's been a little bit, and I wish I had you on sooner, but I guess better late than never.
Yeah, better late than never. It's going to be awesome. I had you on the show. We're going to have you again a bunch of times in 2018. How about that, man?
Sounds like a plan. Well, glad to have you here. Not a ton is going on in MMA, if we're being honest. We had UFC Winnipeg. We were both there. You covered it. I did not, because I am not so lucky to. I guess this is one of the downsides of being born in the 21st century, as of right now, anyways. But usually, our very few amount of listeners like to when I have my co-host Andrew Lawrence here. We usually start out with a bit of weather talk. That's not really necessary. We both live in Winnipeg. We live like 20 minutes apart, I would think. It's not too bad here in Winnipeg right now, but just for anybody listening who's curious. But man, I'm checking the forecast, and it's Winnipeg winter weather pretty soon.
I'll tell you what, this is what I got from a lot of fighters is because we're Winnipeggers. Last week when they're in, it wasn't that cold, but a lot of not just the fighters, some of the press guys too, like even like Esther Lynn and them, they were saying how, it's really cold, but all the Winnipeggers we run into are telling us it's not very cold. Like it's not. It's fine. It was nice last week.
And a part of me, like a sick part of me, wishes it was colder, just so people could experience what we go through for months and months on end during the winter time. Because
this is the real Winnipeg now.
Well, yeah. I mean, I remember just even walking out of a school a few hours ago. It's like, I don't remember it being this cold. Like the morning was nice. Mm-hmm. It was like barely freezing, and I guess the wind picked up. But yeah, if only the card was this weekend, next weekend here in Winnipeg, because then we're talking cold weather. But
yeah, man,
UFC fighters from the South got lucky. But as I said, we were both there. We were both at the Bell MTS Place to watch UFC Winnipeg. You were covering it for, of course, the radio station you work at, TSN 1290 Radio here in Winnipeg. Just from a media perspective, firstly, just because I did not cover the event, there wasn't tons of media there. The media, the amount of media, it seemed, was pretty low, which can be nice. It's a bit more intimate. It's not like you're rushing to talk to every fighter. You probably were able to get who you wanted you guys at Media Day particularly didn't even get that much time, but I would imagine it was pretty relaxed as far as your coverage, the week leading up to the card.
You know what it is? We had I was there. Like, I was kind of disappointed in the local media. In that, I think I was the only local. No, they had a guy from Global there, a camera guy from Global there, but none of the other news outlets or other radio stations were there covering it at all. Pretty much just me and a guy from Global. As far as the other news outlets, Robin Black was there to represent TSN as a whole, and then it was kind of neat seeing the people from MMA Fighting and people from Junkie and who else was there? USA Today was there, and a group out of Brazil were there too. So that was kind of neat to see them and talk to them. Like I said, Esther Lynn was there. I'm a huge fan of Esther Lynn and that just an artist when it comes to fight photography. So it was actually I fanboyed out a little bit meeting her. So that whole experience was kind of neat, and just like press row was kind of fun. Like those fights, just and like you covered MCL when they had their first show, so you know it's like being on press row and that close to the cage and that close to the action, and it's pretty cool. Like, it's a really cool experience to watch MMA. So like, anytime you get a chance to watch MMA wherever you are locally, or if a UFC or Bellator show comes to where you are, definitely worth shelling out the money to buy those tickets, because it's a great experience and just makes you love that sport even more.
No, it definitely is, but it is interesting. Like, I had pretty good seats. I was able to see a clear view of the entire cage pretty well. No heads in front of me were in the way. Like, I had a pretty good view of the fights, but even still, it's incredible how nothing compares to watching it on TV, which is so bizarre, because it's like, oh, you have the opportunity to be there. It's right there. You're in the arena with all these fighters, all these fans, or you're on your couch at home. And I would not, if the UFC came to Winnipeg every month, I would not go to every card. Even if I was a rich man and I could pay for it, if I could afford it, I would stay home a lot of the time, if I'm being honest.
No, you know what it is?
And that's if I wasn't being paid. If I wasn't a media member getting credentialed and being paid, that's a lot different. If I was going as a fan, I wouldn't a lot of the time.
Well, you know what? I would agree with you there. If I had to buy my own tickets and stuff, I don't know if I necessarily would. But, however, there's what I noticed, and this is what I remember, my very first MMA event I attended, is just seeing it live and hearing, like, just how sickening the thud sounds when they hit each other. Like, you don't really get that watching on TV, or just how hard that canvas is when they take each other down. Like, there's a lot there that, that experience you don't really get watching it on TV. So it was neat to reacquaint myself with that kind of real live nitty gritty MMA stuff.
Well, and especially when you're covering a local show and the canvas is hard as a rock and it's not a good canvas, and then you really hear the thud, it almost hurts the guy's back. It's interesting though. You don't, as you said, you don't realize it. Like, I've sat cage side twice. I've covered 3 live events, and the second time at Prestige FC2 in Regina, I was a bit further away from the cage, wasn't quite cage side, but I've been right up against the cage twice, and it's so different. So you definitely bring up a good point. I mean, just hearing everything, hearing their voices, them, yelling, or just, as you said, hearing them, the thuds, during a takedown or things like that. It's definitely a bit eye-opening. You don't realize how much noise there really is.
That's for sure.
But yeah, the media coverage, as I said, it was pretty low. And as you said, I think you're right about there being a lack of local coverage. I mean, Paul Fontaine there from the Wrestling Observer was there. So that was nice. I've talked to him a bit before.
He's a good dude. I like that guy.
He's a nice guy. He writes, as I said, for Wrestling Observer, lives here in the Peg. But I mean, I feel like him and you barely count as local media, even though you're media and you live in Winnipeg, and that's exactly what local media here would mean. But you guys cover MMA. At least, Paul covers it pretty much, regularly. It's not his full-time job. And you do a show weekly. So, you cover MMA, where I think when we're talking about local media, it's, as you said, the global guys that don't cover MMA at all, but because there's events here, they're going to the show, they're getting credentials. Or I wish, like, the Free Press was there, the Sun.
I don't want to put down all the local media. Global was here. Global had a guy at the media day, and their guy Russ Hobson did show up. Kind of like getting into the main card of the event. He sat next to us on the on press row there, and it was it's funny how as much as like UFC is more mainstream than it was when it first started, it's really still not mainstream. If that makes any sense. Like, it's still kind of treated a little bit like a fringe type sport. Well,
it's a very niche sport, and that's something we just have to accept. I don't think that changes, and if it does, it won't be for a long time.
No, it'll be.
But I do wish, it would have been nice to see like a Free Press there, a Winnipeg Sun there, but I think, because they're not there, I think that just sort of goes to our point again, as it's still a niche sport. Not everybody cares about mixed martial arts. It doesn't matter that Conor McGregor's at the top of everything. Just one guy won't change, MMA as a whole. And it still is a very niche sport. It's still very secluded. I think we think it's getting bigger and growing and expanding because we're in the bubble each and every day.
Yeah.
Look outside that bubble, and there's actually nothing there.
No. I mean, like, it's funny because I'll have someone who's not into MMA at all, and they read some like little whiff of something, like, for instance, finding out when Mayweather said, "Hey, UFC, if UFC gives me $1 billion, I'll come fight for the UFC." Right? It means nothing, right? To us, that's not even news worth talking about. But then I'll get stopped in the hallway saying, "Hey, what do you think about this? That UFC think they're going to sign Mayweather?" And I'm just like, "No, it's not really news." I can't.
I wonder, though, how this affects the chances the UFC comes back in the future, because the media turnout, especially as far as local news goes, wasn't great by any means. The turnout, the fan turnout, wasn't all that great. It was under 9,000 people. The Bell MTS Place, I want to say, holds up to something like 17,000. Maybe you know better than me. It's a higher number than a lot of arenas.
You think about it this way: when UFC 161 was here, ticket prices were more. It sold out. It sold out in, I believe, 5 minutes. And the gate brought in over almost $4 million.
Yeah.
This time around, you had just under 9,000 in attendance. And they still made over $1 million at the gate, but you see how small those numbers are. And it makes me wonder, will the UFC come back? Like, look how successful UFC 161, maybe not as far as an entertaining card, but in terms of fans being there and making money, look how much money that made. And it still took them 4 years to come back to Winnipeg. Now it's like, they did okay.
I think, let's be honest, they had a very successful show in June 2013. Nearly a sellout, if not a sellout, made a lot of money, as you said, $4 million at the gate or something like that. And it still took them 4.5 years to come back. So now the numbers are almost, quartered. Like they're insignificant compared to what they made in 2013. So I wonder, are they ever going to come back? Or is it going to be 10 years? Are they, for whatever reason, like, I don't see, like, they had such a bigger success. They did so much better 4.5 years ago, and it still took them 4.5 years. There's nothing to make me believe that they'll be back in 4.5 years or less, which is very unfortunate. I wonder why this is the case, though. Not the UFC, whether or not they'll come back, but why the fans just don't seem to be interested. Is the UFC just going downhill in general, overall? I don't think so, but I think the fact that it wasn't a pay-per-view might have a little bit to do with it. But I think more than anything, fans might, and casual fans don't know a lot about the sport, and they just think back to the first Winnipeg card, UFC 161, Hendo versus Evans. They remember how bad that card was off of paper. The fights weren't that great. It wasn't too action-packed. And then they also look at the card and say, there's almost no Canadians on this card. The biggest Canadian is Misha Cirkunov, and he wasn't even born here. He's like an adopted Canadian. So I think all of that sort of plays a part.
I think it also plays a part with, if you're talking about fair weather fans, it's not just that there's no Canadians, it's just that there's no George St. Pierre, or there weren't any like huge marquee names that your average Joe are going to know fighting on this card. I mean, the card itself, to fight fans, we could see how awesome this card is and was, like fireworks. Just seeing Ponzinibbio against Perry on paper gave people goosebumps who are fight fans. Like in 2013, like, it had never been here before. So some people wanted to experience it, even if they are just a little bit into fighting. And after they experienced it, maybe I don't need to come experience it again. There's, that kind of thing. And when it comes to like UFC and mixed martial arts getting, like, are people still into it? I always say, and I've said this on the show a few times, when I run into someone who I know used to watch UFC all the time, the thing about it is they are kind of like, when I ask them why don't they anymore, their answer is always that there's too many shows. There's too many shows. It's just like, I don't want to spend all my time watching fighting. And, I think there's a mental block there that if you can miss this show, well, I don't mind missing that show and just catching up who wins and whatnot. And eventually, once you miss a few events, that's how you start getting out of it.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I think the fact that 161 was the first time here in Winnipeg. I think, as you said, sort of plays a factor as well. I think all of it does, but to my point again about the lack of Canadians on this card, look at UFC 161. So Rashad Evans and Dan Henderson was, I guess, in 2013, not a terrific main event on paper, but it was, good, decent, as far as size-wise and names go. Lawler, dos Anjos, I mean, Lawler, I feel like he should have drawn a bit more. He's never been a huge draw. At one point, Evans and Hendo both were not bad. But as far as Canadians talent go, you had the late Ryan Jimmo. Yeah. You had Alexis Davis, who was still a contender, or at the time, a bit of a contender. Had Sam Stout. Everybody loves Sam Stout in Canada. You had Roland Delorme. I think that's actually kind of a big one. He's a Winnipegger.
Well, and you know what?
The only UFC Winnipeg fighter.
Right, I think right from the get-go, I thought they made a mistake by not trying
having on Brad Katona.
Local guys, Brad Katona, Mars. You've got good local fighters. Why not put them on some of the prelim fights and just see how they do? And in the very least, you want to sell tickets, you'll get a bunch of their friends. Well, you're going to fight on the card. I'm for sure going now. Like that kind of thing. I mean, there's no Canadian, cards. And you brought up Alexis Davis. I think something else the card was missing was a really good, solid women's MMA fight. There are no women on this card, and I honestly think that's something that should have happened.
That's interesting. I never thought about that, but I know people only are interested in women's MMA. Mm-hmm. And so, if that's the case for more people, I don't know how much it is, but there's bound to be a handful of people, even in Winnipeg, who are interested in women's MMA, but not so much men's MMA. It's just sort of the way it is. But yeah, they should have had Brad Katona on the card. If anybody listening isn't familiar with him, it sounds like rumor has it that he'll be on the Ultimate Fighter 27, awesome. According to Sean Bitter from MMACircus.com. So it's not finalized, but that's sort of the plan, it seems. So he should have been on the card, though. He is 5 or 6-0. He's from Winnipeg.
I think isn't he 7-0 now?
Yeah, maybe. I know he.
Oh, by the way, happy birthday, Brad! It's his birthday today too. His ears must be burning. We're talking about him on his birthday.
He is 6-0 according to Topology. I guess maybe you were thinking an amateur fight. I don't know, but nonetheless, he's had a lot of wins lately. He's looked good. He's well-rounded. He's talented. He's not he's not being fed low competition. I don't, not to vouch for him, but he's a good fighter and deserves a call up to the UFC. He's probably UFC caliber. And
yeah,
let's be honest. Does everybody know who Brad Katona is? No, but that he would have sold a couple hundred tickets.
Yeah,
more. So
because you think of anybody who went to MCL, they definitely know who he is then.
Yep.
And just Winnipeg's a small enough town. Everybody knows everybody, right? Basically. So, you get him, a few more other fighters that, a few more friends and family. That right there could, easily sell it. Just look at your average social. How many people go to your social?
It was a good hardcore card, but they didn't reach out to sort of a non-MMA fan audience well enough. That's what I think. But nonetheless, as I said, we're both hardcore fans. This was a hardcore dream card. A lot of top talent, a lot of good fights, a lot of good matchups on paper. And UFC Winnipeg, let's be honest, 161 didn't deliver too much, but this card, UFC on Fox 26, this past Saturday, delivered in a big way. In the main event, we had ruthless Robbie Lawler versus Rafael dos Anjos, and to the surprise of some, in this welterweight possible number one contender fight, Colby Covington might beg to differ. Dos Anjos pulled off the victory in dominant fashion. He defeated Lawler via unanimous decision, 50-45 on all three judges' scorecards. Marv, I got to ask you, how surprised were you that maybe not Dos Anjos that RDA won, because he actually closed as a slight favorite. So odds-wise, this wasn't an upset, but I saw a lot of people picking Lawler on the Fox poll they did with Karen Brown or whatever. It was something like 73 to 37. I get math that doesn't work, but it doesn't matter. But it seemed to be big on Lawler's side. Were you surprised that Dos Anjos went in there and just cleaned up?
I don't know if I was surprised. Here's what I would say impressed. I think either of them could have taken control of the fight going into it. But as the fight played out, I thought Dos Anjos showed that he's tougher than anyone gives him credit for. He's a smaller guy fighting as a welterweight, fighting the former champion who used to be a middleweight. And he's shown that, look, at this weight class, I feel better, I feel more healthy, and I feel stronger and faster. And he also has a very smart fight IQ. You know, he knew a lot of. There have been a lot of fights of Robbie Lawler's where he leaves himself susceptible. He leaves himself open for leg kicks, and that's what he attacked, and that's what hurt. That's what hurt him was the leg kicks. And then he used set up the leg kicks. Robbie Lawler couldn't get off the cage, and used that clinch game. The clinch game was amazing for him that whole fight, and was hammering with shots. He had the right game plan, and he stuck to it, and he won the fight. Am I surprised? Slightly, but I'm more impressed than anything else.
Interesting. I kind of regret it just because all the time this fight was announced, from the minute it was announced to basically about fight week, I was leaning RDA, not by a lot, but I thought he would just be able to do enough on the feet, sort of how the fight played out. I didn't expect it to be this dominant, but then I ended up changing my pick. I just sort of thought Lawler's size and power would come into play a bit more. I thought he would be able to out-muscle RD for the most part. Not that he's a grinder, but basically be able to defend most of Dos Anjos' takedown attempts and just, not sort of get pushed up against the fence as much as he did, because he did quite a bit. Lawler, that is, but his size didn't seem to matter. Dos Anjos neutralized that quite well. So I was impressed by that in a big way, and just the fact he was able to use certain things, like he landed knees and he had to jump, but because he has a bit of a reach disadvantage, a height disadvantage, but he capitalized on that very, very well. And I think the cardio here too played a big part. Robbie Lawler has never had great cardio, but Dos Anjos, we were a little concerned I'm not concerned going in, but I think after that second round flurry where he just was teeing off on Lawler, but Lawler stayed tough and didn't go down, I was worried. I was very concerned for RDA that, this guy just gassed himself out. Now Lawler's going to start to take over. I was banking on that to happen, or not banking, but I was pretty sure that would happen, just because you don't see guys like that go out on a huge flurry, a huge combo like that, and then just go on to keep dominating. But he did, and that's one of the more surprising parts. I thought that was when Lawler was going to take over, but I was dead wrong on that. I was dead wrong on my Lawler pick, and I think we got to start talking about Rafael dos Anjos as the next welterweight title challenger.
How do you see him doing against Woodley if they do decide to fight?
I don't think it's a bad matchup for him.
Accept that fight, right?
What's that?
It's up to Woodley if he's going to actually accept that fight, but I think they're going to try to make it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see any reason Tyron Woodley would not accept it. Like, I mean, honestly, if Tyron Woodley was going to decline a fight, it'd probably be versus Colby Covington. And even still, he's not a guy to decline fights. He's talked about how every UFC champion and their mom is doing super fights right now, and yet he's fighting all these top contenders, Wonderboy twice, Damian Maia, and so on. So I don't see Tyron Woodley having any problem with taking the fight. I think, gun to my head, I think it happens next. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's just wishful thinking, because RD Woodley is 10 times the better fight to Colby Covington Woodley. I don't know about you, but Covington Woodley just is not intriguing to me whatsoever. I don't give Covington much of a chance against Woodley, but I probably favor Dos Anjos against Woodley, just because Woodley is so talented, but it just comes down to, does he use his talent? And sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes he sits back, and sometimes he doesn't capitalize until he has to, until he needs to hurt the guy, or like we saw in, I think, both Wonderboy fights. And so he's so explosive, but because he's realized, hey, I can't go 25 minutes and push the pace 100%. So let's dial back a little bit. He's figured out his pacing very well, but sometimes that results in inactivity, and I think that's where Dos Anjos can capitalize. The size issue won't be much of, or the size disadvantage won't be an issue. Clearly, Dos Anjos is really good at sort of neutralizing that, and I think he just is the aggressor against T Wood. I think he lands more shots, and I mean, early pick. I know who knows if it will happen, but I would side with Dos Anjos, I think.
You know what? About that size difference, well, this is what I thought was kind of funny. Is backstage at UFC on Fox, is I was standing right next to Tyron Woodley, but then earlier I was standing next to Daniel Cormier. Now, believe it or not, Cormier looks small compared to Tyron Woodley.
Really?
And they're separated, they're champions separated by a weight class. So yeah, it's like, I think the size does would make a difference. I think Woodley would be able to you know, like would be able to do what he did against the other guys. I don't think it'd be exciting, but I think he'd be able to nullify Dos Anjos if they fought.
Interesting. Just for what it's worth, I just looked up both Cormier's and Woodley's height. It's in meters, and I know we all, even Canadians, we all go by feet and inches, but it says Woodley is 1.75 meters, while Cormier is 1.8. I think 1.8 meters is right around 5'10", maybe just under 5'11". And so maybe DC was slouching, but I mean, Woodley, we know that he's not a tall welterweight, and DC's not a tall light heavyweight, but I think DC's a bit taller. At least that's what it says. So,
oh yeah,
maybe DC was bending his knees or something. Who knows? Yeah, he has that bum knee, doesn't he?
He does have that bum knee. Maybe it's because he was a little stockier. Who knows? But they did seem like different in size. And the thing about Woodley, even in his suit, you can see how like muscular and huge he was.
Well, he just mentioned, you know, I'm considering a move up to 185 one day, and that would be interesting because he cuts a lot of weight, and so like I think he said he not balloons up, but he gains, you know, gets up to like 200 pounds or so, maybe more. And so in this day and age, no IVs. The California Commission is really scaling back on the amount of weight cutting fighters can do. I won't be surprised to see Woodley move up, you know, eventually. Probably not right away, but but as far as the rest of the card goes, in the co-main event of UFC Winnipeg, we had, let's be honest, I mean, the odds didn't necessarily say it. I was surprised by, as you know, they were pretty close. Josh Emmett was about, I think, closing about plus 220. That's you know, Ricardo Lamas was a clear favorite here on paper, odds-wise, but I feel like those should have been a bit wider. I was very, very confident in Ricardo Lamas, just like anybody, except for Team Alpha Male and Josh Emmett's parents. But Josh Emmett goes out there, lands a left hook from hell, and puts Ricardo Lamas to sleep. This was a spectacular performance. The guy stepped up on short notice. He missed weight. Didn't seem to be in the greatest conditions, especially on weigh-in day. And Josh Emmett goes out there and puts Lamas to sleep. Lamas was number 4 or number 5 in the world. Josh Emmett was unranked. I didn't think Josh Emmett would be able to do it. I didn't know where Emmett would be able to capitalize or where he would be better, but clearly he hits harder at the very least. He might be a bit more technical on the feet. It's hard to say that. I mean, yes, he got the knockout, but it didn't last all that long, just a minute or two. But man, he goes from unranked to number 5 in the featherweight division. What a victory for Josh Emmett.
Yeah, no, it was a great victory for him. In the prior to the fight on media day, I got a chance to speak to both gentlemen, and you know, I had a really nice conversation with Ricardo Lamas. But I did bring up that you know, I asked him what he says to anyone who calls him the gatekeeper of the featherweight division, and he got pretty, you know, triggered by that. He said that, you know, he doesn't really, you know, care about what people say. He's not a gatekeeper, and like, basically, he doesn't want to be called a gatekeeper. The unfortunate thing is when you look at the record and who he beats and who moves on, that is by default kind of the role he plays. Like,
well, and this just define that more. Ricardo Lamas, as of Saturday night, is now the best gatekeeper at 145.
He is, right? So he doesn't want to be called. It kind of
no, but nobody would want to be called the gatekeeper, if we're being honest.
Now, on the flip side, on that media day, when I talked to Josh Emmett, one thing he did mention, he's like, people don't really know who I am, but if you ask anybody at Team Alpha Male, I'm the hardest hitter on the show. I'm the hardest hitter in the team. So this is the words he said. And then on the Thursday, 2 nights later, he knocks out Ricardo Lamas colder than Ricardo Lamas has ever been knocked out before. In fact, it was kind of, scary. It was a scary sight because as soon as he hit the canvas from where I could sit, all I saw is his feet twitching. That's a scary sight. And then he was out for a long time. Like, that's a scary scene. It's scary to see live that it took him a long time to get up, even just onto the stool. So it was that to me says, yeah, maybe you could say lucky punch, but it's still a punch that landed cleanly and hard. So, my question is, does Josh Emmett take over his spot in the rankings? How close is he, coming almost out of nowhere, to being one of the elites of the featherweight division?
This is always a weird situation just because people aren't ready or willing to accept when an unranked guy who was 3-1 in the UFC, never had a big win. His biggest win might have been, Scott Holtzman, which really means nothing at all. If we're being honest, no disrespect to Holtzman. He's a good fighter, but, Josh Emmett was never close to being a top contender or, let's be honest, even a ranked contender, even in the top 15. And so when you go out and blow the number 4 fighter out of the top 5, out of the water, just destroy the guy, I have to put you in that spot or very close to it. I know, I guess Cub Swanson and someone else, I guess it would have been Ortega and Swanson, both sort of moved up. I think Lamas was number 3, then you had Ortega at number 4, then Swanson number 5. And then now it's like they moved up a bit. Lamas is at number 6 and Emmett's number 5, Swanson number 4, Ortega's number 3. But I think that's right. Like if they bumped Lamas all the way down to, like, say, number 10 and had Emmett at 9, I don't see that being right. I mean, Lamas was number 3 in the world. Emmett should be damn close to that. And I think all the rankers at UFC.com got it right. But as far as it doesn't really matter about the actual number because the rankings don't matter. But as far as where he is as close to a title or how close to a title shot, I gotta say he's 1 win away. Ricardo Lamas, if he beat Josh Emmett, was 1 win away from a title shot. He would go on to fight Brian Ortega in a number 1 contender fight. I'm pretty sure of that. And so I think you just have to put Josh Emmett in there against Ortega instead. The winner of the fight would fight Ortega. What's that? I think so. I mean, why not? What else makes sense? I know some people said Josh Emmett versus Cub Swanson, winner versus loser, kind of makes sense. Like, it'd be a good fight, but I think the Ortega fight makes more sense.
Yeah, I think because Cub's coming off a loss, I don't think that's fair to Josh Emmett.
No, I don't think so either. I think Ortega Emmett's the fight to make, and it's weird because not that long ago, neither guy was. Even last week, Emmett was nowhere close to a title shot. Ortega hasn't been in the top 10 for all that long.
No,
and now they're in a number 1 contender fight to fight the winner of the likely Holloway Edgar. That's crazy, but that's why we love UFC because everything changes so quickly.
Yeah, man.
But man, what a win! And I think the biggest part here is Josh Emmett, as you said, had nothing to lose. He admitted it. Everybody knew it. And Ricardo Lamas, I feel for the guy because he had nothing to gain whatsoever.
No.
His opponent missed weight. He was supposed to fight Jose Aldo. If he had beaten Jose Aldo, instant title shot, no doubts, no ifs, ands, or buts. If you lost to Jose Aldo, that's not a big loss. That's not a huge setback. He'll get back on.
It's the guy who was a king of the featherweight division, right? So you can't
for 10 years
if you lose to that guy. I mean, losing in this fashion to a guy who is not that known, it's a little bit,
It's a big setback.
Yeah, and to his credit, taking this fight, I know that Ricardo Lamas said when I asked him, like, didn't you want to, like, postpone it or wait for another one? He said, I'm a prize fighter. This is my job. This is how I make money, and this is how I put food on the table. He said, I have a new I have a new baby. I got to make money. So for me, it's just like, okay, you're pulling him from my fight. Well, give me someone else. For him, he needed to go to work, and that's basically what it was for him. And to Josh Emmett's credit, he said in the post-fight press conference that, look, I didn't make weight. I didn't do that. It's the first time I ever missed weight. They took not 20%, but 30% of his fight purse. He wasn't eligible for a fight bonus. And he said he said if Ricardo Lamas wants an immediate rematch, he'll give it to him. So
yeah. I don't want to go out and say like this is obviously what happened. We'll never know, but a part of me will always wonder, did Ricardo Lamas take Josh Emmett a bit too light? I think there's a chance of it.
Could be.
Which would be unfortunate because a heavy hitter like Josh Emmett, you never want to take lightly. But I mean, if Ricardo Lamas is, I mean, if I was in Ricardo Lamas's shoes, I would feel it. I think it would be tough to get motivated to fight a guy like Josh Emmett. Barely knew the guy, probably hadn't heard of him before you got the call. You were supposed to fight the former champion, the number one guy. Now you're fighting an unranked guy for probably this, same amount of money. It's on short notice. I really wonder if that's the case. It would suck if it is, but I something inside me thinks he might have taken Josh Emmett, underestimated him a little bit. Later on in the card, or earlier, I guess I should say, we had a welterweight fight between Santiago Ponzinibbio and Mike Perry. One of the better fights of 2017, I would think. Kind of wish it was 5 rounds, although now that I say that, both guys were getting a bit tired. Perry more than Ponzinibbio and maybe 5 rounds. The 4th and 5th rounds might have not been as entertaining.
Those 3 rounds afterwards, after that 3-round war.
Yeah. I mean, after 3 rounds, Mike Perry puked, and so I wonder what would have happened after 4 and 5. But another great fight. What's that?
Was the puking coming because of exhaustion or because of concussion?
I have no idea. I don't think anybody knows.
So I mean, like either or. It's like probably good that it ended in the 3rd round. That fight.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter.
That fight. What's interesting about that fight is I had so many expectations that it was just going to be complete fireworks between these two, and someone was going to get knocked out. The only thing that didn't happen is one of them did get knocked out, but it was like they fired shots. They went in there, and those guys both fought. And I think who won the night afterwards was UFC heavyweight Chase Sherman, who tweeted out before the fight, if this fight, doesn't end by knockout, then I will let Francis Ngannou. I'll put my hands behind my back, and Francis Ngannou is gonna let him knock me out like he did over him. What happened was, as the fight wore on and these guys were hammering each other with shots and nobody's getting knocked out, Chase Sherman just started tweeting out meme after meme, and it was hilarious. It was a hilarious scene with Chase Sherman.
Chase Sherman was the biggest loser that night. That was not good. Let's be honest. I mean, I know a lot of people had this fight not going the distance. I actually picked Ponzinibbio by decision. So not to brag, but I sort of had it bang on. But yeah, Chase Sherman, I guess maybe don't bet your consciousness going forward. Not a great bet to make, but I'm intrigued to see whether or not it'll happen. But I mean, Ponzinibbio, another big win. The guy keeps getting overlooked a little bit. I know some people won. Perry, Ponzinibbio, betting wise, was a bit of a favorite, but I mean, got to give him a big fight. From Gunnar Nelson, Mike Perry, he's looked good in a lot of his fights. He's on quite the winning streak.
I'll tell you what, Ponzinibbio. Go ahead. And this is on me. I have never picked Ponzinibbio to win a fight. I picked Perry over Ponzinibbio. I picked Gunnar Nelson over Ponzinibbio. I think I'm at the point where I'm done doubting Ponzinibbio. Let's see. He's
definitely going to lose his next fight.
Yeah, no kidding. Great.
Yeah. Welterweight has a lot of top contenders and up-and-comers right now, from guys like Kamaru Usman, even throw Colby Covington in there, Darren Till. But now you got to have, Santiago Ponzinibbio in there as well. The guy has been on a tear, as I said. and I'm interested to see what is next for him. Opening up the four-fight main card, we had Glover Teixeira.
I just want to say all that being said, the future of the welterweight division has never looked more healthy.
No, it's true. It's true.
Look at all those names you mean. These guys aren't one-and-done fighters. They're not at the tail end of their careers. They're all at the beginning of their careers. Any one of those guys you mentioned could be a future champion. And that's what's great right now about that welterweight division in the UFC.
Yeah, a lot of promise, as you said, at 170. I know it wasn't like that not that long ago. I think maybe right after Woodley knocked out Lawler, it's like there isn't much going on, but yeah, a lot of guys on the come up, and that's a good thing to see. Kicking things off on the main card, we have Glover Teixeira stop Misha Cirkunov, a betting favorite, ever so slightly in the first round with strikes. It was a TKO win, ground and pound. Cirkunov was looking good. He got Glover up against the fence a little bit, just with strikes. He landed cleanly a few times, but Glover got in and got a takedown, got Cirkunov flattened out in no time really at all. And I think, although this was an interesting one, we didn't see that much from either guy, but I was thinking, okay, Glover's going to have the striking advantage. On the ground, it's pretty close, but I think just with this in mind, I mean, Cirkunov was flattened out so quickly. I mean, Glover must have, you have to say he has a ground advantage over Cirkunov, but I think just another fight that shows Cirkunov maybe a little too much too soon, and for Glover, he might be on the way out. He might be 38 years old, but skill-wise, he's still one of the best light heavyweights on the planet.
Well, let's face it, nobody likes that gatekeeper moniker, but that's what Glover is, right? He's the gatekeeper of the light heavyweight division. He's a tough opponent, but if you can get past him, then you can go fight for the title. With Misha Cirkunov, and that broke my heart because I love Misha. Anytime I get a chance to talk with Misha or have him on the show, it's awesome because he is genuinely one of the nicest people on the planet. And hindsight's always 20/20. So when you look back at the fight after the outcome and everything, you start thinking, hey, maybe because he got knocked out in his last fight standing, that maybe this time he's really sewing up that, and maybe he concentrated a little too much on the stand-up game and then didn't work as much on the wrestling. Because once he, like you said, he had Glover rocked. He was in command of the stand-up, but once Glover took him down, it's like he had no problem getting his back and mounting him and then flattening him out and then ending the fight. It was, one of those things that Misha's going to have to go back to the gym and work on the fundamentals of that. And in the end, I don't have any doubt that Misha will find his groove in the UFC again. I think he's in a division that's very light. There's not a lot of killers in that division, but the ones who are all at the top, and it's something that he's probably going to have to fight Volkan Ozdemir again. He's probably going to have to fight Glover Teixeira again. And in both of those cases, I think, he's well-rounded. He's good enough, and I think he can bounce back. I hope he can.
I think he can too. I mean, the guy still has skills all around. He's good on the ground most of the time. Maybe not up against. I feel like Glover Teixeira is underrated on the ground. Some people forget about his ground game, but he is a heck of a jiu-jitsu artist. So we can't forget that. But Cirkunov, he's getting better on the feet. I don't think he's still quite there, but still a bit stiff, I feel, on the feet. But he's getting better. And he's developing more and more skills. But I think the biggest thing with Cirkunov, if this guy wants to be a legit title challenger or title contender, I don't know. I think I might know what his training situation still is. And I want to say it's still sort of just training out of his own garage. And if that's the case, go to TriStar. Go to a big gym.
I think he trains at Extreme Couture in Toronto.
Oh, really? I don't know. I mean, if he was at Extreme Couture in Las Vegas, that means good things. But I don't know. Maybe,
imagine him at an American Top Team.
Exactly.
A lot of killers his size that he can spar with and learn from. Great wrestlers he can learn from. great strikers he could learn from, or Jackson. Maybe it is time for him to move his camp. I know he's a loyal guy, he's a nice guy, but you train more people you train with, the better you get.
Of course. I think that's almost the biggest mistake of his career in the UFC, not finding a bigger gym to train at sooner. I think he would have, if he had gone down to the States and trained with a well-known gym and a well-known coach and a world-renowned coach, he might not have had that loss to Volkan Ozdemir. He might have not lost to Glover Teixeira. He might be a great striker. He might not have gotten caught by Glover on the ground. And so these are things I think in hindsight, hindsight's 2020. We can say whatever we want, but I think
if he was with someone like Greg Jackson, who's great at mapping out a plan of your opponent,
Yeah, it's very true.
I think Serkinov already has that raw talent, and he has the ability. Like, he has so much potential, and I think there's a good future for him. And on the other hand, Glover Teixeira shows he's yes, he got knocked out quick by Rumble Johnson. Yes, he got knocked out by
Gustafsson.
Yeah. But in that Gustafsson fight, he showed how tough he was. In the Misha Serkinov fight, he showed how skilled he was. So he's tough, he's skilled, he's always going to be dangerous in that division.
Absolutely. Well, one last fight I want to mention real quick. Just give my 2 cents, and if you want to jump in, feel free. But Julian Marquez gets the win in his UFC debut against Darren Stewart. A little bit of hype around Julian Marquez. He's, of course, coming off that highlight reel knockout win over Phil Hawes on week 4 of Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series over the summer. And the guy is now 7-1 in overall in MMA. He's 1-0 in the UFC. And that knockout over Hawes was one of the best knockouts of 2017, one of the best finishes of 2017, if not the best. And this fight with Darren Stewart was a lot of fun. I'm not sure if it deserved fight night honors over something like Ponzinibbio Perry, but it was still a back and forth brawl. A lot of, you could tell both guys are skilled. I mean, Darren Stewart is not a bad fighter. Julian Marquez is far from a bad fighter, but both guys sort of just, bit down on the mouthpiece a little bit, threw some bombs, landed a few takedowns here and there, but a great fight until Marquez, of course, got the guillotine win in the second round. I think, though, again, the fight was great, but I think what stood out the most to me, Julian Marquez gained a ton of fans on Saturday, from dancing in the walkout to doing his whole thing at the weigh-ins, because his nickname is the Cuban Missile Strike Crisis, and so he does that little thing at the weigh-ins, on the ceremonial weigh-ins on the scale, lifting himself up on. That was really cool. Dancing at during his walkout, as I said, looked really relaxed. The guy and the post-fight speech, how could I forget the beard off with Tyron Woodley, UFC welterweight champion, who's there at the Fox desk just above the cage. I
enjoyed that fight, and I did walk away from that event thinking, that was fight of the night. As good as the main event was, and as good as Ponzi versus Perry was, I still thought that was the main event. Those guys, they rocked each other. They were rocking, socking robots in there, and then it ended with the finish. It's funny how you mentioned how Marquez was dancing to the ring to Katie Barry.
Stewart was too,
but it is also Stewart was in his corner. He was feeling that music too. He was dancing up a storm, waiting for Marquez to get into the octagon. So I actually became a fan of both these guys, and then they went out there and they did the darn thing, and I Matt's hats off to them. And like right now, UFC is looking for stars, and I much prefer to put my time invested in a star like Marquez instead of a guy who's trying so hard for people to stand up and notice him, like Colby Covington.
It's true. I can't sit here right now on whatever it is right now, December 19, 2017, and say Julian Marquez is a star in the making. He made his UFC debut just 3 or 4 days ago. So I don't think that's really fair to anybody else or even to him. I mean, how can we have that high of expectations already? We can't, but I think there's hints of a bit of star power. And if the guy gets better, he's training at Syndicate MMA, he trains at Glory MMA and Fitness in Kansas City. If the guy keeps getting better, if he improves as a fighter, his fundamentals, his wrestling gets better, his striking gets a bit cleaner. If the guy keeps performing, I think this guy could be a fan favorite. I don't know if he'll ever be a Conor McGregor, just because he's a super nice guy and doesn't seem to trash talk.
You know what it is? I think the UFC really likes the people they found from Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender series.
Well, Dana White had one tweet.
Machine behind people like that.
Definitely. Dana White had one tweet about a specific fight. Like he said, obviously he does the whole main card starting now, prelim card starting now, but he commented on one fight, and that was Marquez. And you know why? Because not only was it a good fight, but he's a Contender Series guy. So I think they'll put some marketing power behind Marquez, and we'll see where that goes. But let's move on from the card. I hate to skip over some of these fights, but we're running out of time. A lot of decent performances. A couple of snoozers early on. If I'm being honest, I was a little worried at the beginning. Mean Silva was pretty fun, but Chirico Bamboja up into the KO from Chirico, that was a terrible fight. Desi Trio wasn't much spectacular in my opinion, but the card got a lot better, and it ended up being a great night of fights. But let's move on. Let's go on to Gets It, Doesn't Get It. Our first one for this show is Colby Covington, who's been mentioned a couple times already. He did a very controversial thing on Twitter a few days ago. He spoiled what is apparently the ending to Star Wars The Last Jedi. I have yet to see the movie, so I cannot confirm nor deny. We're not going to reveal what his spoiler was, but he spoiled a pretty big part of it. A little annoying. Does he get it or not get it?
I'm a very huge Star Wars fan, and I don't I understand what he's trying to do. All people say don't spoil Star Wars, so I'm going to go ahead and spoil it. He's trying to get under everybody's skin. He's like that. He's that kid who's like jumping up and down saying, look at me, look what I can do. And you know what? I don't care. Guess what, Kobe? You don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. This was a dick move. I know a lot of people were kind of defending Kobe, saying, hey, if you don't want a movie spoiled, get off social media. And I get that angle in general, but I feel it's different from live sports to movies. If I miss a UFC card and I'm all over social media that whole night, and then I see a fight spoiled and I get mad, it's like, why did I'm in MMA Twitter. If I am missing a UFC card and plan on watching later and don't want it to be spoiled, my phone is turned off. I'm not on Twitter. Exactly. I'm not on anything. But with a movie, that one of the bigger movies of the year, in a year that hasn't had a ton of blockbusters, not everybody can go to Star Wars The Last Jedi on opening night. And this was on an opening night for what it's worth. Not everybody has tickets to the first show in their respective city.
Exactly. People are busy.
We're all
kids. People have jobs. People have, school and stuff.
And we're also not on movie Twitter. We're not on Star Wars Twitter. We're on MMA Twitter. Some people have to be on Twitter and social media to do their job. Some people, work, say, for Bloody Elbow on their social media. So it's not like I'm probably not going to see Star Wars for, I'm going to say, another couple weeks maybe, but am I just going to turn my phone off for 2 weeks because I don't want it to be spoiled? No, movies are a little different. I mean, I get it. Some people might think I sound dumb and it's just a sort of first world problem. I totally understand that, but I feel like movies and live sports, I don't know exactly what it is, but they're different as far as whether or not you should spoil them.
Yeah.
So Colby Covington, you do not get it. Let's move on. And Glover Teixeira, after his win over Misha Serkinov, as we talked about this past weekend, he called for a title shot. He said in an interview with me that he with the win over Serkinov, he wants the winner of DC and Volkan Ozdemir. He said so again in his post-fight interview. He capitalized pretty well because DC was on commentary with John Anik. He went over to the booth and spoke to DC. Does Glover get it or not get it for calling for a title shot?
He gets it, and especially what he said when he was in the gym. DC said to him, "With a spectacular victory, you don't get anywhere close to this title shot without a spectacular victory." So he did a callback to that, saying, "Was that good enough for you? You and I haven't fought for the title. Let me fight for the title." Glover gets it. That makes things interesting.
Yeah, I mean the thing is, even if he doesn't get the winner of DC Vulcan, and if Gustafsson can be back by first or second quarter of next year, he's not going to get the next title shot. If Gustafsson is still sidelined because of his recent shoulder surgery, Glover probably gets it. So it gets the title shot. So, I mean, the fact is, even if he doesn't,
if Vulcan gets injured.
Yeah, I mean,
if Vulcan gets injured before January 20th, Glover's getting that title shot.
Yep, for sure. The thing is, Glover, even if he doesn't get the title shot, even if a fight doesn't make sense, just calling for a fight, no matter how big or how unrealistic it is, it's better than not having a name at all. So Glover Teixeira, for that reason alone, gets it. Next up, we got the UFC for not giving Tim Elliott his win bonus. And long story short, Tim Elliott versus Pietro Manga, which was supposed to happen on the card this past week, was canceled. Pietro Manga failed to weigh in. He was reportedly about 5 pounds overweight or so, and his doctor told him to stop cutting. Tim Elliott only got his show money. He did not get his win bonus. Does UFC for not giving the win bonus to him? He did nothing wrong. He declined the fight, but his Manga was overweight and would have had that advantage. Does UFC not get it, or do they get it, or do they not get it?
Here's like, to play devil's advocate. They gave him his show money, right?
Yep.
And they gave the 20 or 30% of the purse of his opponent also?
No, I don't think so. I think they would have if they fought, but they didn't.
Probably should have still given him that too. But I don't know if you can give someone a win bonus if they haven't fought and won, because that's what a win bonus is, right? You know, that's how I can see the UFC not giving that to him. At the same time, I'm always going to advocate for fighters making more money, because the UFC is a juggernaut. They're making money. Fighters should make more money. So I'm going to say the UFC didn't get it on this one.
Yeah, I think the UFC does not get it here as well. I'm a bit more I'm not more confident because it's my opinion, but I feel more strongly towards this than I think you do. I understand where you're coming from, the whole idea that, hey, he didn't win, he didn't fight, so why give him the win bonus? Of course, but he would have fought if his opponent would, followed the contract and followed the agreed to rules and made weight and fought, and it was all good. Because Tim Elliott was banking on winning that fight. All fighters bank on winning, but it's a lot different. Someone might respond to that and say, oh, well, every fighter thinks they're going to win and only have to, so shouldn't everybody get their win bonus? But no, this is a lot different. This was out of Tim Elliott's control, and everybody criticizing Tim Elliott for not taking the fight because he could have fought if he wanted to fight an overweight guy. But why? I don't understand. Like, I understand why people think it's bad that he didn't take the fight, but I totally get why. I mean,
I get it too.
Pietro Manga.
What happened to Lamas took a fight against Norway.
Exactly. And to say that the weight didn't have any, I don't know how much of an advantage, say, a couple pounds is, but even 5 pounds, that has to be a bit of an advantage, not having to cut as much weight or whatever. So I think, the thing is, Ian McCall lost the Justin Scoggins fight last summer in July 2016, and because he had a good manager, he was able to get his win bonus. So it's happened before. There's no reason it can't happen again. UFC big time does not get it. Josh Emmett, after his win, he offered Ricardo Lamas a rematch. He knew it was a big upset. He knew he missed weight. He was mad at himself for it, and he said, hey, if Lamas wants to do it again, I'm down. Does Emmett get it or not get it?
100% he gets it, because he knows that, everything about the sport. And you know what I'll say about him is, after he celebrated his win, he took a look back and saw that Lamas was still down, and you could see how visibly upset he was by that. So he gets it. He gets the fight game. He gets the warrior spirit, and props to Josh Emmett on that one.
Yeah, I don't think they end up booking the rematch. It would make sense because it was a big upset. Went, number 3 versus unranked, but I gut feeling is that they don't run it back just for whatever reason. I don't really have a reason. That's just sort of what my gut feeling is. But Josh Emmett definitely gets it here. Just the fact is, he offered him a rematch. I think mostly because he missed weight and he wants it to be. I'm sure Josh Emmett isn't clamoring to rematch Lamas, but it's sort of a thing like. No. He's sort of putting that option out there. I'm willing to do the rematch if Lamas and the UFC wants it. If all parties are down, I'm down. And I think he's willing to sort of make it fair and square and beat him fair and square, if we're being honest. So I think Josh Emmett definitely gets it. The UFC recently announced that for the St. Louis card coming up on January 14th, the main event will be a already booked event or fight that at the time was not announced as the official main event. Jeremy Stephens versus Doo Ho Choi. I guess, at first it probably would have been co-main event. They probably were looking for a main event, couldn't find one, so they just said, hey, Stephens Choi, you're now 5 rounds. Does UFC do they get it or not get it for this one?
I say they get it. I think they probably were trying to book a fight, couldn't. And you know what? If you're a hardcore fight fan, this fight has to excite you. It just has to. After that Cub Swanson fight, I've been waiting on pins and needles for Doo Ho Choi to come back. So, and I've never disappointed in Jeremy Stephens when he fights. So I'm looking forward to this. I think it'll be a good main event. I think everyone will walk away happy with this one.
Yeah, I saw some people saying this isn't a main event caliber fight. I know we get a lot of huge fights as main events, even for fight nights, but hey, both guys are ranked. Both guys are super exciting featherweights. This is a great main event. I shouldn't say it's a great main event. I mean, as far as rankings go and name value, there's been better, but this is still stylistically a great fight, and I can't wait for it to be 5 rounds because I think it'll go probably 5 rounds or close to it. So I think we'll get our money's worth. And I think they're just trying to push Doo Ho Choi a little bit here. Because if Doo Ho Choi gets this win, that's a big win for him. He's now, a top 10 featherweight, not getting close to a title shot, but he's definitely on the rise. He could be, Korea's next big star for the UFC. A lot to do with the young Doo Ho Choi. So I totally understand why this is the main event, not just because they couldn't find a better fight per se, but I think this is okay as a main event, and I think the UFC gets it here. And I think all the fans saying otherwise don't get it. Eddie Alvarez for shutting down a potential Dustin Poirier rematch. He is not down after fighting Justin Gaethje after knocking him out. First loss to Gaethje's pro career. Eddie Alvarez does not want any part of Dustin Poirier, and if you remember, their first fight back in May of this year was a bit controversial. Poirier wants to run it back. Alvarez does not. Does Eddie Alvarez get it or not get it?
I think he gets it. I don't think he's scared of fighting Poirier. I think what it is, after that win over Justin Gaethje, he's kind of riding high a bit, and he wants to know how close he can get back into the title situation. And I don't know if running it back with Poirier will do that for him. So that's why I think he gets it.
I think this might be the first time we've disagreed for gets it, doesn't get it. I actually think Eddie Alvarez doesn't get it. And I'm not super strong or adamant about this. I mean, I definitely understand your points, but I think he doesn't get it just because it's not like he's saying, yeah, if it happens, whatever, but I'd prefer someone else. He does not want this fight. He does not think it makes sense. He said it does nothing for his career. I understand that point. I know every fighter wants to fight someone higher than him, and Poirier is a few spots below. I think Poirier is number 6, Alvarez number 3, but let's be honest, Poirier's on a bit of a streak. Eddie Alvarez just got back into winning column, I guess, from the no contest and the loss to Conor, but the fight in May was still controversial. Both fighters know that, Poirier and Alvarez. I think it's a bit of a bad look. I mean, Alvarez by no means is scared of Dustin Poirier, but I think this just gives opportunity to fans for fans to throw that at him and say that. And if this was even if the first fight was like a split decision win for Alvarez, that's different. Like, he got the win. Maybe it was controversial, but that's a bit different. But it was controversial because of a legal strike. Yeah, it was a no contest. So I think they should run it back. I think it makes sense. And ultimately, I think Eddie Alvarez does not get it. Last one, Aljamain Sterling, after his devastating knockout loss to Marlon Rice a couple weeks ago, he said he wants better handling of knockout losses from the UFC. And basically, he's referring to the fact that the UFC made no mention after Sterling's loss of whether or not Aljamain Sterling's okay. Let's remember, he, I believe, was taken out on a stretcher. He was unconscious for a lot longer than a lot of fighters that get KO'd. This was a brutal loss. This was a very devastating defeat. Very scary, especially for all the media people there and fans, etc., other fighters. And he's calling for the UFC to, just sort of handle these types of knockouts a bit better. Maybe put out a statement online. Maybe you say afterwards, Sterling's okay. Maybe just mention it on the broadcast 10 minutes later. Do something about it. Even I think another thing he wanted was the UFC should just call him and say, Aljamain Sterling, like a couple days later, are you okay? Like, how's everything? I don't think they did that. Does Aljamain Sterling for this get it or not get it?
Oh, he gets it 100%. In fact, I wholeheartedly agree with everything he suggested. See, like he did mention how he's got friends and family watching the broadcast that are trying to text him, but he couldn't text them back. He didn't have any cell service or didn't know where his cell phone was. So they're worried. It'd be great for that. And as a fan, I was worried. You know, and I'm just a fan. I don't know the guy. I've never talked with him. But I would like to know, you know. But if they were to release a statement saying, oh, he's okay. In fact, I didn't know Aljamain Sterling was okay until he showed how thick his skin is. And he tweeted out saying, oh, damn, I did dab when I got knocked out. You know, that's when I was like, oh, geez. Okay. Now I know Sterling is okay. But before that, it's like, you know, do a favor to not just the fans, but his family and everything, and just have the broadcast say, hey, we just got word that, you know, Aljamain Sterling is walking, he's talking, and he, you know, he's on his way to the hospital. He, you know, at the same time, you know, we have to also think about this from the UFC standpoint, right? We're going to play devil's advocate here. Is maybe they don't want to go and say, hey, yeah, he's fine, even if he is walking and stuff. Because what if what had happened to Aljamain Sterling is the same thing that, you know, happened to Tim Hague. And like, yeah, he did walk, he did talk, he made it to the hospital and passed away. And then UFC is on the broadcast saying, oh, no, he's fine. That isn't a good thing. But what I do agree with Aljamain is, in the very least, on a personal note, why couldn't Dana White or somebody from the UFC just send a text to him or his manager saying, hey, we just want to know how he's doing? He definitely has a point there.
I see where you're coming from with the devil's advocate part, but I think a follow-up to that would be, they don't need to say Aljamain Sterling is fine. I don't care what anybody says. You were not fine even an hour after getting knocked out unconscious. Tim Hague was not fine even before passing away 2 days later after that boxing fight. But all they have to say was he's on his feet. He's walking around. He's talking. He is no longer unconscious, and they don't leave themselves any room to get in trouble, and as if like they were saying wrong information, because it is true information as long as they're not flat out lying that Aljamain Sterling was walking and that he was responsive and he was talking. They don't need to say, oh, Aljamain Sterling is great, he's fine, because that's subjective. But if he's walking, they can say he's walking, and there's no risk of getting in trouble. So
yeah.
So Aljamain Sterling gets it. I mean, again, just sort of to add on to what you said, you put it great, but yeah, I mean, the UFC should point out. I mean, Ariel Helwani recently has been all about the let's not say UFC is violent. Let's sort of get rid of that word and not promote fights as violence. And I don't agree with that. I don't strongly disagree with it either, but I think he has a point when he says the UFC promotes a fight as violent or promotes a card as violent, but then when violent things happen, they don't sort of follow up on it. They don't look at the negatives of violence. To the UFC, violence is just positive. But when violence happens, when Marlon Rice lands that knee on Aljamain Sterling's noggin, and we see the other side of violence, the scarier side of violence, the life-threatening side, perhaps, they don't do anything about that, and they need to. So,
yeah, they sell violence like they sell sex. You know, what are highlight reels made out of? The most violent knockouts. You know, so.
Yeah, I mean, Aljamain Sterling, I think it's good that he's speaking up. I don't know if the UFC changed their ways. They seem to be stubborn on a lot of things, but I think a fighter getting knocked out, I think it'll be very tempting for the UFC to change. They'll see, hey, this guy just got knocked out cold. It's like he has firsthand experience, and he's wanting change, so maybe we should change it up. So I think Aljamain Sterling all around gets it. That is the show. Episode 142 of the MMA Circus is in the books. Marv, thank you very much for taking the time. I know you stepped up on short notice, so I really appreciate that. Before we get out of here, just let everybody know where they can find you on social media and any plugs you got to make for your radio show, anything else. The floor is yours.
Yeah, you know what? You can find me Big Marv 204 at Big Marv 204, both on Twitter and Instagram. And the show airs every Sunday morning, TSN 1290 and iHeartRadio. That's 9:30 to 11:30 a.m. Central Time. So and that iHeartRadio, there's a new iHeartRadio 2 app. Download that one; it's much better. It's really good. So you can find us on there. You can find us on TSN 1290. We are taking a bit of a hiatus for the next 2 Sundays to celebrate Christmas and New Year's, and then we'll be back Sunday, January 7th in 2018, where we're going to do our best of 2017 episode.
Awesome. Well,
hey, thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate this. This is fun.
Yeah, it was fun indeed. Thanks again for coming on. You guys can find me on Twitter at Nick Baldwin MMA. You can find all of my writing and MMA coverage over at bloodyelbow.com. I did not have UFC credentials to the Winnipeg show, but I did as much as I could as far as coverage goes. I got a lot of interviews. They're all on this YouTube channel, and some have found their way on Bloody Elbow as well in article format as well. So just trying to do this off the top of my head. Let's see if I get everybody. So I talked to UFC light heavyweight champion Daniel Cormier. I talked to UFC
you got to talk to Daniel Cormier. I didn't get to talk to Daniel Cormier. I got to wait behind him while he got cookies, and I was waiting. That's about as far as I got to Daniel Cormier.
The benefits of waiting outside the training room at the Fighter Hotel for an hour. But it was great to talk to DC. It was an absolute pleasure and honor, and great. Big thanks, obviously, to him for taking the time. He definitely did not need to. Just the same thing for every fighter that took the time. Tim Elliott, talked to him twice over fight week 1 before the fight when it was supposed to happen, one just a couple hours after it was scrapped. Talked to UFC lightweight contender Dustin Poirier. Talked to UFC welterweight Danny Roberts. Talked to James Krause, who was supposed to corner Tim Elliott. Talked to Zach Cummings, who cornered Julian Marquez. Talked to Alessio Di Chirico, who beat Olawale Bamboshe. Talked to Jared Cannonier, who dropped a loss to Jan Blachowicz. Talked to Nordine Taleb. Talked to Josh Emmett. Talked to Glover Teixeira. Talked to Olawale Bamboshe. And first, but not least, I did that wrong, but Julian Marquez, also talked to him. He was my first of 14 interviews this past fight week. It was great. A lot of time spent at the Fighter Hotel, but it was worth every minute. And I'm hoping this turns into a bit more of a regular thing. But you can find the MMA Circus on iTunes, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, Google Play, Overcast, SoundCloud, TuneIn, Player FM, Podcast Addict, Pocket Casts. I think I covered it all. And here on YouTube, go like us down there. Go hit the subscribe button. Go comment. Let us know all your feedback, questions, comments, concerns, anything else. We appreciate it. Let us know what you're feeling. Thank you all for watching. We really appreciate it. For Big Marv, my name is Nick Baldwin, and we're out.